Hi, sixth graders. We are on our Unit 3B unit, and we're in our rational numbers unit, and our lesson is on fractions and decimals. So being able to write fractions as decimals, being able to write mixed numbers as decimals, and being able to write decimals as fractions. So this should be the title of your page. Okay, writing what we read using place values. So if I have 7/10 as a fraction, I know that it would be 7/10, and as a decimal, 7/10, because we've learned about place value. This is my tenths place, 7/10. 30 hundredths, I have 30 hundredths. Hundredths is my denominator, and then 30 hundredths. Remember, hundredths is the second place over from the right side of the decimal. So 30 hundredths, because this is my hundredth spot. 265 thousandths. 265 thousandths is the same as 265 thousandths. This right here is my thousandths place, so that's why it is red, 265 thousandths. So the TH at the end of the word we've talked about is the number of digits to the right of the decimal, but it also means that it is a fraction. If the denominator of a fraction is a factor of 10, 100, 1000, or any higher power of 10, you can use mental math and place value to convert. So we see that we have 0.25, which is 25 hundredths. And then I just know that 0.25 written as a fraction would really be 25 hundredths. This top number is the numerator. Bottom number is the denominator. Not sure if I spelled that right. Write each fraction or mixed number as a decimal. So again, if we can get it to tenths, hundredths, or thousandths on the bottom, it makes it easy for us to write it as a decimal. So I know that if I multiply 20 times 5, I get 100 on the bottom. So if I do times 5 on the bottom, I have to do the same on the top. 7 times 5 is 35, and then I have 35 hundredths, which would be 0.35 or 35 hundredths. 5 3/4. Again, I know that I can do 4 times 25 to get 100 on the bottom. So whatever I do on the bottom, I have to do to the top. 3 times 25 is 75, and then I keep my 5. So 5 and 75 hundredths would be 5 and, remember a decimal is and, 75 hundredths. You do the next 3 and then check back. 3 tenths, I don't have to convert it because it's already a tenth on the bottom. So it would be 0.3 because this is my tenths place. 3 25ths times 4 times 4. So 3 times 4 is 12. 25 times 4 is 100. So 12 hundredths is 0.12. And then 6 1/2. 1/2 we know is 0.5. So 6 1/2 would be 6.5. It needs to have a 10 or 100 or even like 1,000 if it's 34 thousandths. It has to have a 10, 100, or 1,000 in the denominator in order for you to use this number as your decimal. So 34 thousandths tells me that it has to end in the thousandths, so I actually have to add a 0 because this is my thousandths place. All right. Keep up with your equivalent fraction and decimal chart. So if you can read this, sometimes I know it's small and blurry, and we'll go over our common fraction to decimal conversions in class. So you can just wait and you don't need to write this down quite yet. Plus I see that 2/3 should be 0.6 repeating, but we'll talk about repeating in a little bit. All right, any fraction can be written as a decimal. To do this, divide the numerator by the denominator. Division ends when the remainder is 0. So sometimes, like 8, we have 3/8. Sometimes there's nothing to multiply by to get to 10 or 100 or 1,000. So therefore, we need to divide. This fraction bar right here means division. So 3/8 is really the same as taking 3 and dividing it into 8ths. So I'm going to do 3 divided by 8, which I know that I can't do, but I know that if I add a decimal, then I can add as many zeros as I want, because remember, zeros after a decimal do not add any value. They are really just kind of placeholders and do nothing. So because 8 can't go into 3, I know that my decimal is going to pop up here. Add a 0 over my 3. 8 can go into 33 times. So 3 times 8 is 24. 30 minus 24 is 6. I'm going to bring down my 0. 8 can go into 67 times. So 7 times 8 is 56. Subtract that. 60 minus 6 is, or 56 is 4. Bring down another 0, which is 40. 8 can go into 45 times. 5 times 8 is 40, and then I'm done. So I didn't really need this extra 0. I just like to add a bunch of zeros, and then if I need them, I need them, and if I don't, then they're just extra. So 3/8 is the same as 375 thousandths, or 0.375. 1/40th, we need to do the same. So we're going to do, because again, there's nothing that 40 can be multiplied by, or I should say a whole number that 40 can be multiplied by to get 100 or 1,000. I know 40 can be divided by 4 to get to 10, but then that would make my 1 a decimal, and we don't want a decimal on the top. So I'm going to do 1 divided by 40. I'm going to add a decimal with a bunch of zeros to start. 40 can't go into 1, so I add a 0. Add my decimal. It can't go into 10, so I add another 0. 40 can go into 100 2 times, so 2 times 40 is 80. 100 minus 80 is 20. Bring down my 0, and I know 40 can go into 200 5 times, because 5 times 4 is 20, and then add my 0. So then I'm done, because I get 0, so that can just go away, and my answer is 25 thousandths. So 1/40th is the same as 25 thousandths. You try these on your own and then come back and check. So 7/8, we have 7 divided by 8. Add some zeros. 8 can go into 78 times, so 64. 70 minus 64 is 60, or 6, but then I have to bring down my 0. And then 7 times 8 is 56, minus 4, bring down the 0, and then I get 5. So 7/8 is 875 thousandths. 2 1/8, so we have 1, so I'm going to leave my 2 for now. I'm just going to do 1 divided by 8, add a decimal, bunch of zeros. 8 can go into, it can't go into 1, can go into 10 one time. 1 times 8 is 8. 10 minus 8 is 2. Bring down a 0. Goes into it 2 times. 2 times 8 is 16. And then bring down a 0, and we get 0.125. But then remember we have this 2. So then my answer is, where should we write it? 2 125 thousandths. So notice there's a little bit of a connection. 1/8 is 0.125. 3/8 is 0.375. 7/8 is 0.875. So these are fractions like 1/8, 3/8, 7/8, 5/8, fractions that you will want to remember. And then 9/20, I know I can do times 5 to get to 100. which means I have to do to the top. Whatever I do to the bottom, I have to do to the top. So 9 times 5 is 45. So then 45 hundredths is the same as 0.45, and bring down my 7. So I have 7.45, or 7 and 45 hundredths. A terminating decimal means that it stops. So like 8 and 6/10, or 24 and 62 hundredths. A repeating decimal goes on and on and on forever. So 0.333333 would be the same as 0.3 repeating. And I put this bar over it, which is called bar notation. It's kind of small right here, I know. To tell me that instead of sitting and writing a million threes, I just write that bar over it. I could have 0.6 repeating. I could have 0.13 repeating and just my 3. So then this would be the same as 0.133333. I could also have 0.13 repeating, and then that would be 0.131313, and so forth. Okay, so the line over the number means that it just keeps going on and on and on. So how do we write fractions as a repeating decimal? 7/9. Again, 9 can't be multiplied by anything to get to 10 or 100 or 1,000. So we divide 7 divided by 9, add my decimal and a bunch of zeros. 9 can go into 77 times. 7 times 9 is 63. 70 minus 63 is 7. Bring down my 0. Oh, I forgot to add my 0 and my decimal up here. 9 can go into 70 again 7 times. 7 times 9 is 63. We get 7, add a 0, and we can see that it's just going to keep doing that forever and ever. So it's going to go 0.77777, which is the same as 0.7 repeating. You try these last 3 of the video, and then we will be done. So 2/3, 2 divided by 3, add my decimal. Remember, I'm adding a decimal and zeros because my number inside is smaller than the number outside. So I add my decimal with zeros in order to give me more values and places to work with. 3 can't go into 2, bring my decimal up. 3 can go into 26 times. 6 times 3 is 18. 20 minus 18 is 2. Bring down my 0. Again, 6 times 3 is 18. 2, add a 0, bring it down. So we end up with 0.6 repeating. And I know it's repeating if it has happened a few times. If it happens twice in a row, you want to do it again just to make sure that it is legit repeating. Maybe it just happened to be the same twice in a row. 3/11. Let's get a different color. 3 divided by 11. So add my decimal and my 0. 3 can't go, or 11 can't go into 3, but it can go into 32 times. So 2 times 11 is 22. 30 minus 22 is 8. Bring down my 0. Goes into it 7 times, so 7 times 11 is 77. 80 minus 77 is 3. Bring down my 0. 11 can go into 32 times. 2 times 11 is 22. 8, and then we add a 0. So now we can see it's going to start repeating. So then I would write this as 0.27 repeating because the 2 and the 7 repeat. And then 8 and 1/3. So 1 divided by 3. 3 goes into 10 3 times. So 3 times 3 is 9. 10 minus 9 is 1. Bring down my 0, which is 10. So 3 again, 1, bring down my 0. So 1/3 is 0.3 repeating. So 8 1/3, I'll write that up here, would be 8.3 repeating. So 1/3 is good to remember and know forever is 0.3 repeating. 2/3 is 0.6 repeating. These would be important and good to include in your notes. And that is all I have. I will see you tomorrow.